We are all storytellers, good, bad, ugly, whatever may be the case, but we are all storytellers. People may forget you, but they remember the stories that you told or that you didn't tell. So most of the time that if you look back in your career, 10, 15, not only career, if you look back in your family, people you may not have met for 5 years, but the mention of their name will remind you of a story about them or many stories often about them, which will create that character alive or bring that character alive in front of you. And you will almost feel like it's not been 5 years, we know this person. Of course, that happens more in life, but in workplace, which is this conversation more about, we also know people by their stories, or sometimes by the stories that they tell, not just them as stories. And all that put together makes that whole conversation more lively and maybe more useful. You may argue that you may know the person through stories, but what is the point? What work gets done through that? A lot of work gets done through that because eventually work gets done through two people coming together, some connection, or multiple people in a team coming together, some connection, some common theme, some way of binding them together. And that is when people start working for each other, which is the essence of all professional or career life. And to explore this topic, we will go deeper into the art of storytelling from one of India's top storytelling coaches, uh, and I will introduce in a minute. But before that, my name is Anshuman Tiwari. If you are new to the show, I host this series called Manage Better, which is usually a series of LinkedIn lives and often YouTube live simultaneously. Today is 98th show, 98. So I've been very lucky. People from, I would say, affection and patronage have been very generous. That a show that was started for 10 episodes is now on 98th episode. In this series, for those especially who are new, what I do is that I bring people who are coaches, consultants, authors, practitioners, experts in their own field, who can help us get better. And that's the theme, manage better. That we all can manage one level up from wherever we are. Whatever may be the skill set we may possess, even if we are very good, we can get better. And of course, if some areas we want to get better, then of course this kind of uh, option is there. So very quickly, just double checking. Yeah, all the three streams are live. So this is being streamed live on my LinkedIn and YouTube, and Ameen's, who's our guest, his LinkedIn as well. Quick word about Ameen Haque, who's our, and I'll bring him in the show a little in a bit, but a little bit about him. He's founder and story monk at Storywallahs, has helped organizations discover and harness the power of storytelling for several years, with over 20 years in advertising, theater, mythology, the works. He's a story coach. He trains and consults people, uh, clients on storytelling, narratives, brand stories, pitch consulting, personal brand narrative, and the whole works, around storytelling. And some of his clients, that is, Storywallah's clients include Harvard Business Review, BCG, Deloitte, PwC, HSBC, Puma, McDonald's, Accenture, Titan, Google, and worked with Ogilvy, McKinsey, and you know there aren't any many people with this background and skill set in this space. So keep your questions ready, because if there's anybody in India who can answer your storytelling related questions, that is Ameen. So with that, presenting to you the story monk Ameen Haque. Namaskar ji, and welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm delighted to be here, and heartiest congratulations to you on being 98 not out. Uh,
Two more needed.
two, two more needed for a century, but I applaud your commitment to this, and to keep this going is not easy. I I not just congratulate you, but I admire you for this.
Thank you, Aminji. Like I said in the introduction, the original purpose was a little bit time during the pandemic. This show actually started a little before the pandemic. Initially it was more about recording and then editing, and then I realized that why not stream a live conversation. Of course there are limitations of live because sometimes emergencies can occur, but thankfully all have gone well. So
Excuse me.
delighted to have you on the show. The format, just for you and anybody new who's coming from your stream, is that I have some prepared questions for you, which are more conversational, and we will also take some audience questions, or rather, you will take some audience questions, and we should wrap up in around 45 to 50 minutes or so, plus minus a little bit. Okay. So just as we get into it, the first obvious question for me was, what is Ameen's story of getting into storytelling? Because this is not a career you grow up thinking, oh, I'll become a storyteller and a storytelling coach or something. This is not a career you think of during your maybe class 12th or graduation or anything. It obviously is a considered choice which happens later in life. That's my point of view. You may surprise me with your answer. So over to you.
नहीं, ऐसा नहीं है कि कोई बचपन में ये भी सोचता है कि मैं बड़ा होके चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट बनूं। ऐसा
I
हमारे
mean,
सामने नहीं है। Yeah,
ma-
I haven't come across a child grade 5 and below who says I want to grow up and uh, be a ethics and compliance manager. I
Bhagwan.
very very rarely, children want to be pilots, they want to be cricketers, they want to be actors, they want to be dancers, or they want to be teachers, doctors, etc. यही सपने
Hmm.
होते हैं. I wanted to be James Bond. I actually wanted to be
Yeah.
a train driver. I
Hmm.
found train journeys very interesting. And if you ask my younger self, way back in time, I mean, what is it that you wanted to be when you grew up? I wanted to be a train driver. Then I wanted to be James Bond. Then I wanted to be Amitabh Bachchan. Then I wanted to be Sachin Tendulkar. Uh, but you can see in this answer itself that I was always cooking up stories in my own head, and I was living in these created worlds and imaginary worlds. And part of that is because I grew up reading a lot. Uh, you know, before you become a singer and start singing, you listen to a lot of music.
Hmm.
Before you become a cricketer, you also watch a lot of cricket. So my path has been no different. I was reading a lot, and that reading prepared me for the world of stories. So Champak, Chanda Mama, Target, Tinkle, Hardy Boys, Nancy Drews, Indrajal comics, Ramayana, Mahabharata. But I also started doing theater when I was in school. And while I was not good with that, my teachers encouraged me quite a bit. And I'm grateful to them for the same because that early encouragement is very important. And I fell in love with theater. So I did a lot of theater in high school, then college. Uh, and in terms of my education after doing business administration, I studied communication in a formal sense. I
Hmm.
went to an institute called MICA where you study communication. So that was my formal learning ground, Pathshala, if I could use that word, where I formally studied communication, and then my job was also in communication. I worked in Ogilvy and Mather, my first job in advertising, where you're responsible for creating communication and using communication to influence people. Now that got me interested in learning what kind of communication persuades people, what kind of
Hmm.
communication persuade people, and what are the tools that we can use to improve the persuasion quotient, because all of us are trying to persuade each other at the workplace. And if you can learn that, that can be. And in the evenings I kept doing theater. तो ये दो parallel tracks चलते रहे. एक working in advertising, evenings spent doing theater, and both of these are great learning grounds, universities for storytelling. तो ये करते करते फिर ये एहसास हुआ, रियलाइजेशन हुआ कि a lot of people do good work, जो कि उनका काम बहुत बहुत अच्छा है, यहाँ पे
Hmm.
ऊपर है. But when they stand up to talk about the work, the story falls short. And that's not a disservice to the audience. First, it's a disservice to their own good work कि आप अच्छे से अपनी कहानी नहीं बता पा रहे हो. So I realized a lot of people need help with that. And I found joy in that because both my parents were teachers. I like teaching, so I said let's start teaching this, and that's how uh, my second career as a coach, consultant, student of storytelling, and teacher of storytelling happened.
Fantastic. One reason, I mean, I ask this question to most of my guests is that by design, some of these professions are at the edge of, or they're at the intersection of multiple professions, like you yourself explained. Storytelling is not a profession which somebody starts with. There will be certain intersections and like old Venn diagram thing, one Venn diagram getting to another and third and fourth, and eventually, like you realize that us sabka intersection is storytelling. Uh, and since this is a also career related series, I also part time do some mid career coaching. I keep telling people that don't have very fixed views. Take multiple lessons, learn from multiple experiences, and who knows what will click for you. Having this very rigid sometimes is not very useful. Great. So in a way, we have some fans already in the show. Pritam seems to know you well, so thank you, Pritam. Harish knows me well, so he's welcoming you, and there are a few others. So we'll get to them. Thank you, Harish and Pritam. We will. If you have questions, by the way, anybody who's joined, there are over 175 people as of now. So please drop in your questions. Those who are new to the format, if you are on LinkedIn, which most people are currently, 175 odd, you can drop in the question in the question box within the show page. And if you're joining from YouTube, and the same, if you're joining on Ameen's LinkedIn, you can do the same. And if on YouTube, the same normal process of asking a question. I'll pick your question. Just in case it doesn't work, just drop me a DM and I will pick that question.
I wanted to take a moment to comment on the wonderful advice that you give to people about width. And, you know, our job is to create dots, not worry too much about connecting them. Eventually, they will connect.
Correct.
But कैसे connect होंगे? Let's not worry too much about them. Let's just go and create the dots. And the more experiences. So there's no right path about this depth versus width. Actually, you can take
Hmm.
either of the two. Width is a good path. I say this through width comes depth. But
Yeah.
actually, if you take any topic and go deep into it, you will also discover width in it. Take music itself.
There is,
अगर आप गहराई में उतर जाते हो म्यूजिक में तो आपको उसमें enough width मिल जाता है. So there is actually the good journey is to have that balance between and be equally excited by depth as well as width, and the dots will connect. So great
there is,
advice to give young people. Just wanted to compliment that.
thank you, thank you. Um, Now starting to peel the onion a little bit, and we've all seen, I have a full-time job in a corporate setup for several years now. This year completing 30 years. Storytelling in the last maybe 5, maybe 10 years has certainly become, if not the top, one of the top skills in every list that comes out, whether coming out from Harvard, Fortune, Forbes, anywhere. So it is extremely critical skill for people in corporate world, and by general definition for slightly senior people because they have more people to address and influence. So it is assumed that they certainly definitely need that, which is a separate question, but we can tackle that later. But in the corporate world, we need this skill set, and this is where you many of your clients are also there. And since this show also caters to people in that category, my question is around why has this happened? Why do you think storytelling has become vital in mid or senior career, particularly in the last few years? Or maybe my assumption is wrong and it was always there and we are just discovering it now.
No, no, your assumption is not wrong. It has actually become more important in recent times. So your guess is absolutely right. Uh, and the reason it has become important, and I think it's evident to everyone that it has become uh, more important in recent times, and the reasons are multiple. The first one is the nature of industry that we work in has changed. It's less. uh, you know, industry in the sense of manufacture, less agriculture, and more the services industry has grown. And service industry is about working with people, and a lot that could have been automated has been automated or will get automated, and therefore, what cannot is the human aspect, and that will become more prime as we go along. Then the other thing is when something increases disproportionately, the other thing becomes valuable. Let me explain this. When color photography came, and so earlier, remember black and white cinema? Everything was in black and white, so this is disproportionately high. The first
Yeah,
color film, and everybody goes and watches it.
yeah.
Doesn't matter whether it is good or bad. The idea that it is a first color film, that itself will make it a hit. So you need, when something becomes very prominent, you need a counterpoint for that. What has become very prominent in the last 10 years is PowerPoint.
Hmm.
And you need a counterpoint to that. And the counterpoint to that is going back to simpler ways of communication. When we start over orchestrating something in terms of communication, we go back, or we want to go back to the simplicity. So every trend will create a counter trend, and PowerPoint became such a powerful trend that it needed a counterpoint, which harked back to simpler times. But it's also, so that's one of the reasons. And the last reason that I'd like to point towards is the information explosion. And with information explosion, whether it's WhatsApp or the number of keys on NetApp or the number of news channels, etc., what has happened is that this information has exploded. Attention spans, uh, or people's attention has become a scarce commodity. Actually, today, attention is the scarcest commodity in the world. It's not diamonds, it's not data, it's not oil, it's people's attention. And to be anybody who can hold on to that is controlling the dollars. Uh, so that's why a combination of these reasons why storytelling has become important. But if I could add one last one, it is this,
Mhm.
that earlier, if you look at leadership and what makes a leader a good leader, and there are many books on the topic, and some books say there are ten things that make a good leader a leader, 7 things that make a good leader a leader, or 12. If you read those books, one of those things that makes a good leader is communication skills, or what we call soft skills, but in today's world have become power skills. And given a choice between two people who are similar in their technical skills or other skills that are required for the job, the better communicator will be chosen for the more senior role.
And I think this last point certainly resonates because I've seen this throughout my career as well, including sometimes working for me as well, and sometimes not working because there was somebody better. But one thing I certainly realize is that, like when you were saying PowerPoint, I often say that the best way to make your point is not to make it on PowerPoint. So because people look at the slide and not at you. You are supposed to be the medium or the message, and something else inanimate becomes to or becomes the medium, which we are giving up our power to something else. But
Absolutely.
really well said.
Absolutely. And if I could sort of jump in and make a variation
Sure.
on what you said, which was so beautiful, the variation would be make powerful points, not PowerPoint.
Yeah, I'll use it someplace. But I also like the concept of this counter trend that I think it's true for almost everything. Even in technology, we find that the more handheld or mobile technology is there, there will always be a counter trend for minimalism, less usage, and all, because at beyond a point it starts to take over your life. Similarly, like in case of PowerPoint, beyond a point it starts to take over communication, and therefore a counter trend is needed, and which is true for almost everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, good. So we started peeling this onion, but From a corporate point of view, I mean, you've worked with so many, leading corporate firms and leaders as well. In a corporate setup, what is there any boundary or a guideline as to what kind of stories can work? And we will go into this question a little deeper in terms of timing and structure and other things, but those are more technicals. But first up, is there any boundary for what kind of stories work in corporate, or anything and everything is okay? And if you have an example to illustrate that, that would be awesome.
Sure, the boundary is actually the audience,
Hmm.
and therefore, if there's only one boundary, which is who's your audience, and therefore what will work for them to explain the point that you want to explain. But just like in PowerPoint or Word, we use underlining or making something bold or writing something in bold or italics. Essentially, we do all of this to emphasize something. So in the corporate environment, if you really want to emphasize a point, if you want to underline it, the simplest way to make it memorable is to attach a story. For example, if you're talking about values, culture, what we celebrate in this company, and you want to talk about that, say integrity. The word integrity or inclusion, 70% of companies in the world, if you go to their website, will have some version of integrity in their values. But what it means for A company could be very different from what it means for B company. And it can only be explained through a story that this is what we mean by integrity, uh, or inclusion, or treating people well, or respect for employees and respect for customers. I'll give you an example. Maybe I think it is best that I tell you a story. One of my favorite stories that I like to tell is that many years ago, Mr. Ratan Tata was traveling by car and he was not alone in the car. He had some of his colleagues with him in the car. And it was a long drive, something like Bangalore to Mysore or Mumbai to Nashik. On the highway, during the long drive, the car broke down. Now, most people, when a car breaks down, step out for a stretch break and they like to stretch their arms and legs. The smokers welcome a bonus smoke break, and that's what people started doing. Soon they realized, oh, Mr. Tata must be sitting alone in the car. So they went back to give him company. He was not in the car, he was sitting on the road next to the driver, sleeves rolled up, helping the driver fix the car. Uh, I use this story to just illustrate a simple point that story is not what you say, story is what you do. You can write with golden letters at your reception that we treat people well, but story is not what you say, it's what you do. Now, I could have just said this in words that actions are more powerful than words. You would forget that very quickly, but you will never forget the story that I told you. So that's why I said, and going back to your question, in the corporate world, if you want to communicate something that's really important, you underline it by attaching a story to it, and that's how you make it memorable. So the only boundary is what is the context and who's my audience and what will drive the point home.
Yeah, fantastic story, first of all, about Mr. Tata. I mean, there are so many stories about the man that, you know, there can be a separate session on that. But that reminded me of another cliched term, I mean, is that we have an open door policy, anytime anybody welcome, those kind of things. And I distinctly remember, and just don't want to name them, two managers who were at the extreme spectrums of this. And one would openly say this, he had posters and banners of this. And actually, the door was always open to his office, but nobody was welcome. His terror was such that nobody would go and even knock and enter. So, what was said and what was demonstrated was not in sync. And another manager, great leader, never said anything like this, that you are welcome, you can come to me anytime, no, no poster, no banner. But the welcoming smile and the manner in which he would welcome us, if you ever went up, would mean the world. People would remember that 1 minute conversation for weeks, that we got that 1 minute with him. And I think the second one is Nandan Nilekani. So the first one I don't want to mention. The second one is Nandan Nilekani, whom I had the pleasure of working for a very brief period. So
And
I thought,
he's a fantastic storyteller. But to Nandan's credit, not just in his oratorial skills or the way he speaks and connects the dots, But in this example, what he's doing is an elevated level of storytelling, which is that he's not just saying it, he's embodying it, he's living the story. And that's the higher order story, that you don't just say it, that there is alignment between your actions and words and values. And when all three are aligned, then your story becomes authentic. Otherwise, there are a lot of storytellers today, but authenticity is
Mhm.
rare. And it's authenticity that elevates your story and takes it to the next level. The second thing that has happened in this example,
Mhm.
and I want to touch upon this, is that we must be humble enough to recognize that the best story of our work cannot be told by us. It can only be told by others. If if Nandan is saying that I have a open door policy, it's an average story. But if
Yeah.
everybody around him says, wow, Nandan has open doors always and he's accessible, that's a much better story. And see who's telling that story. Nandan is not telling it to me. You are telling it to me. So Nandan has converted others into brand ambassadors on his behalf. He has infused that warmth in people so that they go and tell the story. And that's a better story. That, if
Yeah.
you say, if you say I'm a good singer, that's an okay story. If 20 people say Anshuman is a good singer, that's a fantastic story.
On that note, I can guarantee that not even two people will say that I'm a good singer, but we'll take your point. Okay. Getting deeper into the this thing, the show, we have a few questions, but I'm trying to pick two representative questions which were similar to the ones that I had prepared. So, you know, respecting that somebody else has a better way of asking that question, I will bring Preetham's question on the screen. To be a good storyteller, you need to be a good listener and, of course, have observation. What are other key ingredients? Assumption Preetham has that you obviously need other ingredients. So, what would be, in your words, those ingredients?
Sure. Uh, you have, first, congratulations. You have identified what is most important in storytelling, to be a good listener. Because only then you will know which story to tell. And listening is not just about listening to the spoken, it's also about listening to the unspoken. The and good listening is not just about listening, it's also about asking questions. So if there is a muscle that you want to build the muscle on asking right questions, interesting questions, and good stories come from there. Let me illustrate through a simple example. When children come home, we ask them, how was school today? We ask the same question every day. So no interesting stories will come. But instead, if you were to ask, uh, did you feel sorry for someone in school today? Uh, which part of the school is the scariest part of the school? Uh, who did you feel? Uh, did you see any act of kindness in school today? If you could be anyone else in school just for one day, who would you like to be and why? These kind of questions will elicit good stories. So the other skill which is required apart from being a good listener is the ability to ask good questions so that you can. So when a manager goes on the shop floor, they are able to ask good questions. When you come into a brainstorming session, you are able to illuminate that conversation and bring life to that conversation with great questions. The third thing, then, I would say, apart from listening and uh, ability to have uh, this awareness of asking the right questions, is being able to craft your narrative uh, and say things in a way that simplifies it and makes it memorable. For that, it's important for us to recognize that it's not just what we say, but also how we say something that makes a difference. And there are tools for that. So, some awareness of those tools, either consciously or subconsciously using them while speaking. For example, uh, saying something in a new way makes it memorable. If I say I'm sorry, and you've heard people saying sorry, 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 sorry 1,000 times. If I say sorry, it may not make an impact. If I find a new way of saying it, huh? If I say that I I am embarrassed about what I did today, I am this will rise above saying sorry. Hmm? And I'm just looking at just surface level articulation right now. Instead of just saying sorry, if I said, I'm pretty embarrassed about this, I know that what I did was condemnable. You will remember this much more than me saying I was sorry. So
Certainly.
finding a way to get that message across that rises above the clutter, because there is a huge clutter of communication. So how do you rise
Yeah.
above that clutter is important.
And I think this last one truly struck home because we do often feel that, particularly in corporate setup, and since most of the audience now it is 250 plus, people do seem to hear the same comment each time. And after a while, they probably stop even listening. You forget about even understanding. They even stop listening the same comment. So changing it in quote unquote story may help in that sense.
Yeah,
So
you may not be saying anything new, but if you can bring
correct.
newness into the manner in which you are saying it, you're still ensuring that the story will be heard. And I think the great communications coach there was Preeti Zinta's character in a movie called Laksh, where
Hmm.
when Hrithik Roshan proposes to her and says, "I love you," the
Hmm.
song goes like this: "अगर मैं कहूँ मुझे तुमसे मोहब्बत है, तो क्या
Hmm.
कहोगी?" And Preeti Zinta says, she says, "I'm bored of boys saying, I will bring the moon to you, will bring the stars to you, because ये तो 50 साल से सुन रहे हैं." So she says,
Ah,
इसी बात को अगर तुम जरा नई अदा से कहते, जरा और
ah,
सजा के कहते, तो अच्छा होता.
hmm. And this we will many in the audience will remember, particularly because of the film and the fantastic film by the way. So
Yeah, but
I want to.
our managers, our leaders, our audiences in advertising are also, consumers are also saying this to the brands. कि इसी बात को अगर तो आप थोड़ा और सजा के कहते, investors are also saying to the startup founders, यार इसी बात को अगर तुम जरा और सजा के कहते, थोड़ा नई
Yeah.
अदा से कहते, तो अच्छा होता.
Yeah, and in many ways, everybody is looking, and that also demonstrates sincerity and effort also. So if you are putting in the effort to say the same thing in a different way, in an elevated way, like you use a beautiful word, it also shows my sincerity. Like, people do comment that even if you are on a telephone interview, dress well and, smile. Why? Because, it is carrying your sincerity through the invisible medium as well. Okay, I had the next question, I mean, around the craft of storytelling. How do you build a story? And you already narrated a couple of them. I shared one about brief one about Nandan, but many. Everybody has these stories. Anybody who's worked for a few years will have many stories. But the question was more to in the process to be used to craft one. And Haresh Amre has asked a question, the same question in a better way. So his question or his narration is more around how does one pivot from writing stories? So just for context, Haresh often writes on LinkedIn in terms of short stories and all, generally from corporate. And so question again, how does one pivot from writing stories to narrating them? Which form of story sharing gets wider reach over a period? So yeah.
Uh, well, each era it is different. First, let me congratulate you. You are writing stories. That itself is a good muscle to have, because writing is an act of thinking. Uh, if one speaks fast, one may not be thinking too much, but you're writing, so you're already building the thinking muscle. So congratulations on that. You're in a very good place. Uh, Moving from writing to speaking depends on the medium, depends on the audience. There are some mediums. For example, there's a blog site called Medium. If I'm on Medium, I don't want to listen to people. I want to read. But if I'm on Instagram, I don't want to read, or I don't want to read too much. I would rather listen to you. So it depends. Now you've got a story, and if you think that story is a gift, that story can make a difference to someone, and you want to take that story far, then once you've written the story, why restrict it to one medium? Why not find a way of telling that and sending that story out to as many people as possible? And that's where multiplicity of medium helps. एक बार तो आपने लिख ही लिया है, अब उसको just just narrate that story so that it can go on those mediums where people are listening to the story, so that those who read will benefit from it, those who listen will also benefit from it. So I think the key is finding the right medium where writing goes right. And now on some mediums you will see that if you share a story in words, it gets a few likes. If you add images, it gets more readership. And if you add a video, it gets even more readership. However, our presence on that medium can be ulta, the exact opposite of that. We mostly write a lot, post fewer images, and very rare videos. So you see, our presence is at contradiction with what is working on that medium, and that's where narrating becomes important. Don't worry too much. My suggestion would be that don't worry too much about the craft and the tools. Just get started. When we started learning how to walk, we didn't worry up too much about the craft. We just got started. We fell a couple of times and we learned how to walk. You'll fall a couple of times and you'll learn. But I think the most biggest stumbling block is, and I must get the right tools, I must do the right course, and then I will start, is also is already uh, the best gift of a procrastinator. I will keep pushing this out till I do the right course. So my suggestion would be, start. Look at Anshuman. He's been doing this. He didn't start off exactly in this way. We were chatting and he told me earlier I used to do this recorded. Then during, as kept doing this, I realized I can also do this live. And he started doing this live. Uh, it's learning on the job. So, brother, you will learn on the job. You just start telling voice modulation will happen, looking at camera will happen, using the right contrast color, and not wearing yellow shirt on yellow background. All of that, those are minor things. Yeah, they will happen. You get started. You tag me. I am looking forward to listening to your stories.
There you go, Harish. Harish, you asked this question, and that reminded me, I mean, of you know saying that the shoes never run, you do. So, in amateur running, people spend a lot of time in buying the right apparel and shoes and everything else, but they forget that the shoes never run. You do.
You
So, and so that's the essence of what you said, is that get started. And there is sometimes, and I'm not so much of into storytelling, but whatever I have learned, I mean, is that through LinkedIn, mostly my work is mostly on LinkedIn, is that there is a lot of emphasis, undue emphasis on getting the hook line right. The emphasis should be on getting the story right. What is your message in that story? Just that story, not too many stories, just one story in that one. And the hook line usually emerges from a good story. And I've often seen some of my best written posts or best liked posts, may not be best written, but best liked, most liked posts, didn't have a hook line. They were just nice to read stories, easy, comforting to the soul, and maybe it reminds somebody of something that has happened in their life. Those are the most beautiful ones because you are telling the story, but the person reading it is relating to somebody. And if 10,000 people read that story, all 10,000 have different memories of or interpretations of that. So I'm glad
absolutely.
you brought that up. Mayuri has sent a few messages, mostly about, I think, the authenticity comment earlier you made. So not so much a question. Thank you, Mayuri, for your support. Coach Vandana is also supporting. There's a very good question from Vinity Sheth. Vinity is you can say, a ghost editor. So she writes books for others and is very accomplished in the writing space. So her question is more related to writing. Do you feel the formulaic approach to storytelling is a good idea? I think it came when you were explaining a little bit about the craft, even though you said that craft doesn't matter, but I think she had asked that question around that time.
No, no,
And
so yeah, craft matters, but you will discover the craft as you go along, and you will learn it as you go along. Vinati, I'm grateful for a wonderful question. Uh, does the formulaic approach matter? Yes, it matters. Of course, it does. Because what are formulas, or what are structures? They have evolved. They're a set of guidelines that have evolved, or best practices. So instead of calling them a formula, let's call them best practices or guidelines. And I love the word guidelines. They are not prescriptions; they are suggestions. But we must learn the system. Then we must play with the system. Uh, I'll give you an example. Farida Khanam ji has, one of her famous ghazals is "Aaj jaane ki zid na karo." Now we have heard that very often. Uh, so A.R. Rahman wanted to sing that song. Now A.R. Rahman is trained musician. So you have to know the formula or the guidelines or the structure. You have to know the best practices. Once you come from within the best practices, you are able to play with it. So now, when Rahman sings the song, he brings newness into it by going off meter. But his going off meter is aesthetic because he is playing with it with awareness. So the structure is important, the formula is important, that there is conflict, which is at the heart of the story, and then there is a character whose goal is to resolve that conflict. Uh, and it does work, but play with it. Take them not as prescriptions but as suggestions, and learn them so well from inside that you can play with them. So the key is to elevate your craft so much that you know this so well, that you can bring play into that. And that's really when play can happen, when you जब किसी चीज को पी जाते हैं, उतर जाते हैं उसके अंदर, मिट्टी में जब सन जाते हैं, when you become one with something, then you can play with it, and that's the height of craft. And in writing, that's very important, uh, that you get to that level, and that comes from effort. I also want to not undermine effort in storytelling. The best storytellers are not born storytellers, they are hardworking storytellers, they put in effort. It's very similar to, uh, when you watch somebody sing well on TV, on Indian Idol or Saregama, you know what we say? We say, wow, what effortless singing. What we mean by that phrase is that so much effort has gone into learning this, that today that effort is invisible. So craft must reach the level where it becomes invisible to the audience. When somebody sings, people should say effortless singing. That means a lot of effort has gone into it. So make the craft invisible. That's a more craft answer for those who are deeply engaged with storytelling.
I, I was thinking of people who have mastered the art of reverse sweep in cricket. And a lot of people, like you said, they marvel at the fact that how effortlessly the person can reverse sweep. Because the person has done 10,000 hours of practice, or whatever number of hours of practice in nets for months and years to be able to get it right in that manner. And like you shared the example of singing, or singing reality shows. So Vinity has accepted your response. आज बिल्कुल मत जाइए, आप दोनों जाना पड़ेगा 10 मिनट में. Thank you. But that also reminds me to the audience, and there are still more than 250 people. So those who, of course, came through my profile, please take some time to check Ameen's profile and follow him. He shared some wonderful stories, and of course, there's usually very often some announcement of workshops and things also, that in case you're looking for some help in that, getting deeper into the craft, or practicing it, it might be useful. And if you have some love left, I also share some inputs related to mid-career and related stuff. So a follow for me will not be too bad. Okay. One more question comes in the same space. And I mean, after a long time, one show where I am not getting to my questions only, man. Or audience questions are far better crafted, I must say. Maybe the same sentiment. So we will respect that and take a question from Mohan. Uh, um, I should not murder his name. Kancharla, Mohanji. What's more important in storytelling, structure or spontaneity, and how does one balance, if at all, one should? I mean, this is I am adding that.
Well,
Anything for Mohan?
it's a beautiful question. Uh, s- how do I answer this in the best possible way? Spontaneity is nice, but if you can bring spontaneity into practice. Yeah. Have you seen a classical musician? They do years of practice, and then in the Hindustani classical tradition, you respond in the moment to what is happening in the moment. But to be able to respond, you have to have a lot within. Then only you can respond. So, stories that are told spontaneously, when they come from a place of depth, they connect better. When they come from a place of preparation, they connect better. But that preparation, you're not preparing for that moment. You've always been in preparation mode. You build a bank of stories. You carry that story bank with you, because you never know when you will be in conversation with someone. Somebody could be sitting on a plane next to you, and they turn to you and they ask you, "What do you do?" And most people are not able to answer even that simple question well, where people leave a mark for a lifetime. I remember I was on a flight, and one of those rare opportunities where Mr. Azim Premji was sitting next to me. And you talk about elevator pitches here, the person is captive audience for 2.5 hours, but you can't speak to someone for 2.5 hours. Of course, they have their own work to do. Uh, and we exchanged glances, and I got an opening line in, but the idea of the opening line is to grab that attention. And you can be spontaneous there, but that spontaneity there, if it comes from years of practice, then you will be able to turn that into a beautiful conversation that may open many doors for you, or just a beautiful conversation that becomes a gift for you and the other person. So, uh, let me approach this very critical question from another perspective. When I go into a meeting, or when you go into a meeting, there are 5 people in the room, and it's a 30-minute meeting. Most people prepare, what they want to prepare, as if, it's a 30-minute meeting, let me prepare for a 30-minute meeting. Well, it's not a 30-minute meeting. There are 5 people in the room who are giving 30 minutes of their time. That's 5 into 3. It's 150 minutes long meeting. That's the amount of time you are sucking up from the universe. So would you be spontaneous, or would you prepare? If you are in continuous preparation mode, then you can bring spontaneity. So that's my take on spontaneity, that the audience, even if you have a 10-minute town hall, I want to be spontaneous, I'll speak spontaneously. Hello, there are 1,000 people who are dialing into that town hall. 1,000 people into their 10 minutes. That's 10,000 minutes. You owe them the best version of that story. And when you are in continuous practice, then you can afford to be spontaneous. Then come from spontaneity, I would say. Then respond to what is happening in the moment, but be in that continuous practice mode to be good at the spontaneous level. Otherwise, spontaneity is overrated.
Really well said. As you were talking, I was reminded, I think show number 50 or 55 was Papa CJ, one of India's top English comedians, globally renowned. He was on this show. And he said something that what you see as a joke, a 30-second joke in a show, has probably been performed 200 times in bars and nightclubs and open mics and in amongst friends, to make it sound and make it feel like it has been created right now. So that's the essence of I think Mohan's question as well, that uh, You may appear spontaneous, but the people who have given their time deserve and owe you owe that preparation to them. Thank you very much. I think this was fantastic. There are a few more questions. I'm trying to squeeze in some questions now that we are closing in.
And while you're reading that question, if I can add another dimension, which is,
Sure, sure.
take a popular singer, Sonu Nigam, whatever show he does, he will have to sing 10 of his best songs. So can you imagine
Mm,
his plight that every show he has to sing the same songs again and again?
mm, mm.
Now, somebody asked there's a singer called Bruce Springsteen,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
there's a magazine called Rolling Stones magazine, and the which covers the music industry. So a journalist asked Bruce, you sing the same songs every time, don't you get bored? And he said, there is
Mm,
someone in the audience who's come for this live show, and he will
mm,
never be able to come again. When I sing for that person who is who's going to be here only for this one live show of mine. I want to make it memorable for him. So you may be singing the same song for the 1,000th time, but you bring that newness, you bring that spontaneity in that rehearsed version. Now, to me, that's a great equation. I can't even begin to thank you for such a beautiful question. Thank you.
yeah. So I mean, I am certainly from that era where we all have heard Bruce Springsteen. So I don't need a reminder, but thanks for igniting some memories. Coach Vandana Dubey has a fantastic question. Uh, yeah. So it's a tricky one as well. Can you share a moment in your life that changed everything for you? It may not be
There,
one moment, but
yeah, there
can
are
you
a couple
share?
of moments. There are a couple of
Sure.
moments, and they changed a lot for me. I'm glad you asked that because that question makes me reflect on my own journey, and I'm grateful to you for this moment of reflection that you've allowed me. Let me share two or three moments. I was telling stories to children, and to those who are listening, I'm sure you are interested in business context here, but let me explain this. The most difficult audiences to tell to are CEOs and children, and they are alike. They have low attention spans. They are brutally honest. So if you want to, and they value the time. So if in a very different way you want to build your storytelling muscle, try telling stories to children. To me, one of the best moments, I cannot forget it, is, and it has happened many times, is you tell a story to a child. You don't know that child. The child has come just to listen to a story, or the parent has brought the child. You are a stranger, you are telling a story, and the show or the performance is going on, and somebody else's child runs to you and hugs you, and that parent is shocked. What is happening? Well, that trust, that love, that affection from a listener is pure joy, bliss. It's unparalleled. Money can't buy it. That validates for you that you are on the right path, and that reaffirms to you the power of storytelling. So, that was one of the moments, and that moment has happened many times. The other is a very different kind of a, a lot of people judge themselves and say, should I tell my story or not? My story will be, uh, what is there in my story? I haven't climbed Mountain Everest 7 times. I haven't broken my leg 7 times and bounced back from injury. So what is there? My life is ordinary. We judge ourselves too harshly. Your story doesn't have to make a difference to a lot of people. If it makes a difference to one person who needed to hear that story, your story has done its job. So I remember I shared something from my life, and somebody responded by saying, I needed to hear this today. I don't know that person. I don't know what he or she was going through. But if somebody says, I needed to hear this, your story has offered hope to someone. So, who are you to judge yourself and say, is my story good enough or not? Your job is to put it out.
Yeah.
And if it makes a difference to one person, the sun is not thinking every morning, it's not waiting for inspiration to come out. The moon is not waiting for muse to come out. The koel in the forest is not, it's singing, it's not worrying about whether I'm getting likes or not. It is just doing its job. You do your job, you tell your story, don't worry about likes. Yeah, the crow sings its own song, it doesn't worry about likes, and but other crows will listen to it and will come to the party. So you do your job and it'll make a difference to someone. So that was another realization. Oh my god, what a beautiful question. Thank you again.
Then I'm glad Vandana asked that question. Thank you, Vandana. And because of your question, we could get such gems out of Ameen. Uh, I think as you were speaking, I was reflecting on something recently that happened. I think last year. So somebody, I used to work for a Australian bank in early 2010s and all. And as part of my role, I had conducted several workshops on operational excellence and all. And somebody wrote to me last year, about 12 or 13, on LinkedIn. So I'm not connected. I have no reflection of that person, no memory. But he wrote to me that, Anshuman, you may not have obviously remember me. I attended your session on this day and month and whatever in 2011. And you said something about operational excellence, about efficiency and effectiveness. And I have a question. I was flabbergasted as to, first of all, this is for a teacher. This is extreme delight that somebody remembers your sessions after so many years. And then the question was very genuine. And of course, the rest of it is not critical. But the fact that you could make a difference in somebody's life and that person could remember after so many years is important. Okay, we are now in the wrap-up mode. So, lot of questions are still pending. I mean, but what I'll say that first of all, I'm putting up Ameen's website, his organization website on the screen. So those who want to check more about what he and his team of storytellers do, please check this out. And secondly, of course, he's very active on LinkedIn. So if you want to follow him, you can do that. Quite a few questions and some nice comments. Thank you, Janki. Always useful. Mayuri, Marcello maybe, and many others.
To all the questions that we could not answer today, send them to me on my LinkedIn, and I'll try and get back to you within the next two
They will
days.
they will remain on the show page also. I mean, so generally that's also easier because if you answer it on the page, then somebody else might also be able to read it. And I will also, some are, one or two questions are for me, so I'll also try and do that. Before we go, I have one question which I want to ask also, is that we all, of course, love you as a storyteller and your band of storytellers. Who are the storytellers you love?
Quite a few. I like, uh, you know, it is popularly attributed to Ved Vyas, Mahabharata.
Hmm.
It's one of the most beautiful stories I have read. And I'm
Hmm.
sure many people have added to what Ved
Yeah,
Vyas said.
yeah.
Stories evolve over a period of time. And to all of those unsung storytellers, also, I'd like to say a thank you. It's an amazing story. Uh, so, Ved Vyas, I admire quite a bit. All the religious leaders who have gifted us beautiful stories. I'm checked out of religion, uh,
Yeah.
but
From a story
I
point of view.
at the story level because those stories anchor us. They are like lighthouses. They guide millions of people. They are beautiful stories. Um, as a storyteller, I also admire Indra Nui quite a bit
Hmm.
as a business leader who uses narratives. She brings a lot of warmth, spontaneity, and most of all, authenticity and the ability to speak, to be vulnerable. I admire her for that. I also admire Steve. You used to admire Steve Jobs quite a bit because to look at Steve Jobs, he was not always like that. He was
Hmm.
not winning elocution competitions in school. He was not winning essay competitions. And so people have this fallacy that, storytellers, they are always like that. He was a hardworking storyteller and he became one of the better ones over a period of time. And that it's a great testimony to effort and hard work and how much you can achieve with practice. And for that, I admire Steve Jobs. But most of all, I admire, Gandhi and Mandela because
Hmm.
they were storytellers who understood symbols. The power of traveling by third class. It's a powerful symbol
Yes.
that Gandhi understood.
Yeah.
The power of wearing dhoti, the power of salt to
Mm.
catalyze people. And most of all, they were authentic storytellers. And I admire them for that. That they didn't tell a story uh, just through words. They lived their stories and paid the cost for their stories. They embodied the stories in their life. So they became the stories rather than just telling the stories. And when you become your story, you want to admire those people. So Kabir, Gandhi, Mandela, and millions of others who tell stories like that. Lastly, I would say good bosses and teachers in school. There are also some teachers who
Yeah.
inspire you and leave a mark, and then those teachers to whom you or those bosses to whom you want to call on 5th September and say thank you. To those bosses and teachers, it would be incomplete. My answer would be incomplete if I wouldn't acknowledge them and say they are also amazing storytellers.
I'm so glad you brought the last point in because invariably, in appreciating and recognizing the work of known leaders like the ones you mentioned, and for good reason, we often miss out the unknown heroes in our lives who probably played a bigger part because you know as much as we admire Nelson Mandela and Mahatma Gandhi and others, they may not have made a direct impact in our day-to-day life, but these teachers have. Okay, so still questions coming in. Sorry, guys. I have promised Amin only 1 hour, or he only had 1 hour today. We will try and bring him back after a few episodes, or maybe if we get to 200, who knows? So we'll do that. With that, thank you very much, Amin ji, and my audience as well. We usually end the show with the announcement of the next one. Next one is on 6th with Samir Chadda, CEO of KPMG Global Services. So it will be more of a corporate kind of a show back to that. And the 100th one is a big surprise that I will reveal on 6th. So, but thank you once again. I know, and while you were mentioning about the flight, I recall that we met in a flight only. I mean, and I didn't have a very good answer when you had asked me what brought me to ISB that day. I was lost in some thought, and now I know that moment was important. But thankfully, I repaired the situation and could get you back on my show. So with that, I'll let everybody go. Thank you very much, guys. See you on 6th, same time. Thank you. Bye bye.